You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rebecca Deutsch, who is a PhD candidate from York University and is doing a paper on MAID and suicidality. And so we're going to start with a trigger warning for folks. Just know that we are going to talk about suicide. So if you need to do something to make yourself okay in this hour, please make sure you do that. So Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Can you tell folks a little bit more about how you came to be doing this paper?
Absolutely. So I think I relate to the question of MAID from a couple different personal angles. As someone who struggled with suicidality for a large part of my life, I come with a lot of kind of personal experience about what some of the driving factors that people might have for accessing MAID. I've also lost a couple people that I really love to suicide, um, which I think has given me a lot of empathy as well for the kind of reasons that might lead someone to try and access MAID. So those are kind of the two big personal reasons. Yeah.
So can you tell folks what is MAID? And of course, this show goes all over the globe. So make sure it is clear for folks who may not live here in Canada. What is MAID?
Absolutely. So that's a very interesting question. MAID, it stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. And in around 2015, there was a big court case where the law that basically legally prohibited physicians for assisting patients in dying was repealed. And when that happened, it was largely reserved for people for whom foreseeable death was imminent. And this is now called a track one cases. A couple years later, around 2017, I believe, there was a case out in Quebec where somebody argued, I can't pronounce their last name, but I think it's Truchin or Chuchin. I'm sorry
That's
for
okay.
anyone from Quebec. um, but he had an argument that it was against the Constitution to deprive people who are suffering from an irremediable condition from MAID, and that went forward through Bill C7. At the same time, kind of in a sunset clause, which is really interesting, um, made MDSUMC, which stands for Mental Disorder Sole Underlying Medical Condition, was introduced as well. But that's still very much in flux, and it's not entirely clear whether that will continue to be delayed. I think we'll have a lot more information about that in the next couple of months.
So let me just be clear then. What's happening right now is that mental health issues are considered or are not considered as qualifying conditions under MAID.
So technically, it's not allowed to be enacted, but it was passed so that the sorry, let me back up for a second.
Sure.
Basically, what happened is they were introduced alongside physical disability, but they decided that different kind of assessment measures were really necessary. So it's been delayed 3 times now. And it's unclear whether or not it will be delayed again. Um, and some of the way that that's being framed is particularly interesting, I think, especially from a MAD perspective. Um, does that kind of answer?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you
Yeah,
have a personal relationship to the issue of MAID. Can you tell folks what that is?
right. Um, so I guess for me, the large relationship that I have with MAID is having struggled with suicidality myself and having lost people to suicide. Um, in my own experience, I am very grateful now that I didn't have access to something like MAID because now life is so much different for me now, and I'm really lucky in that kind of respect. But I also think for some of the people that I lost to suicide, usually people have to resort to some pretty horrific means
Mm-hmm.
to die if they're trying to die by suicide. And I think they can be deeply traumatic, both for the person who dies that way and for whoever is left behind. Um, and I think that having access to something more compassionate could could really save some of those people from a great deal of harm. So I really feel a lot of tension with MAID, where I see a lot of possible room for harm, particularly in a Canadian context from the way that it's being enacted. But I have a hard time being fully against it because people do die by suicide, and I don't think that they should have to resort to really horrible means to do so.
Mm. Yeah, I actually had an argument, quasi argument, whatever argument you can have, having a difference of opinion on social media, but
Mhm.
it was about MAID, and it was about MAID in particular around mental health issues. And one woman came and said, well, that MAID is so, the program is so stretched in terms of how many people want to access it and use it, that it should be left just for people with physical disabilities, and people with mental health challenges should be kind of set aside.
Mhm.
Um, my argument to her was that exactly what you just said, which is that, you know, what you're saying then is that there's a difference between physical disabilities and mental health challenges, and one is more deserving of a kind, loving death that is more. I don't want to say more possible, but more guaranteed with people you love by your
Mhm.
side, that is reserved for people who have a certain kind of disability, and people with mental health challenges who already suffer from human rights challenges all the time are relegated to doing it in secret, and maybe not doing it in such a way that they complete or die by suicide, and
Mhm.
that they have to do it alone, and they have to do it by not telling their loved ones. And so and the possibility that they survive, and in surviving they have physically harmed their body to the degree that now the quality of their life is even worse than it was before. And I, pointed out that I just didn't see how those two things, because she was saying, well, they can do it anyway. So,
Oh.
I mean, the amount of lack of compassion that that statement had was kind of
Mhm.
remarkable. And I am of the opinion that people have a right to choose in their lives whether they want to be here or they don't. Uh, I think it is our right. So it amazes me how many people are able to take the issue of human rights and mental health and not recognize that, how much they're discriminating or how much they are applying stigma to certain things. So you said you had suicide in your family?
Yes, in my family, there have been a couple of suicide losses, and those losses were really profound and really shattering for a lot of reasons. One of them particularly, um, the person that I lost, losing her it completely changed the course of my life, but part of the pain that I carry for that is the way that she died and how she was alone. She spent all of her life showering everybody in her life with so much love and care. And when she needed that love and care the most, nobody was there. She was by herself. Um, which really fills me with a lot of sadness. And I want to kind of return to something that you were saying earlier about how people are trying to create this kind of distinction between disability
Mhm.
and mental health concerns. And I think what makes this really interesting is I think we know a lot of issues with mental distress can start with bodily kind of, there's no easy distinction that I think can be made between what constitutes a solely physical disability versus something that's solely mental. I think that's a very interesting kind of construction that's going on, which is really built into the way that we stigmatize certain kinds of people um, who struggle with mental health issues, particularly. I think there are different types of stigma that go on in that realm that are making the way these two categories are being shored up as completely different really troubling.
I just finished having a conversation with somebody who was talking about how, and of course this is true, how in society people tend to think of anybody who has a diagnosis that is a mental health challenge of any kind are suddenly reduced in their ability to speak for themselves or to
Hmm.
discern things or to decide what is best for them or what they're, to make an informed choice around treatment, even. And what you're talking about is kind of the same thing in that we have a particular kind of stigma and discrimination that happens in the realm of mental health.
I think it's very much the same thing. Even in the policy context, which I was examining in the article that I wrote, one of the key things that I don't want to say surprised because unfortunately it wasn't a surprise, but it was maybe an unpleasant realization is a better way to put it, is how no people who may consider accessing the program of MAID MDSUMC were even remotely consulted. The people whose voices were prioritized were psychiatrists, a couple doctors, a nurse practitioner, and lawyers, but there were no people who would actually be impacted by this expansion or who have any kind of experience and knowledge that would have been really necessary for understanding how you keep our communities safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you see so much of that in so many different realms, and it's showing up very acutely here.
Yeah, it is actually the only industry on the planet. It is a business, and it's the only business on the planet where customer satisfaction literally has no say in what happens or
Right.
what is offered. And in what you've just described happens over and over and over, where they design some program or they design some institution or whatever, and the primary stakeholder, which is the person who would be accessing it as somebody who has a mental health issue, is never consulted as to what is required. And we come from a long history of the mental health industry deciding that people who have a mental health challenge cannot discern what is real or what's fake or what's fantasy, and so that other people have to do it for them. And so we lose our voice over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over. And like I said, it's the only industry where the consumer has no voice and no right to complain, even half the time. What was your methodology that you used to create this paper?
I primarily did a discourse analysis. So basically, I sat with this policy document for a period of months. I took it everywhere with me. Like, I took it on the train, I took it, in the backyard. I went everywhere with this document so I could become very, very familiar with it. Um, and then I went through it with a really fine-tooth comb, trying to understand what the language was trying to accomplish in a sense. Um, and one of the things that I noticed, I kept noticing that they mentioned suicidality over and over again. And I was really interested by this because in a lot of ways, MAID really is assisted suicide. It isn't separate from suicide. It's a different form of suicide, right?
Right.
Um, so this distinction really kind of grabbed me. And there was one section, which was a conservative supplementary opinion, where they mentioned suicidality 24 times in like a very short number of pages. And I was really taken aback by this, um, the frequency with which it was kind of being evoked as this horrible boogeyman almost that we had
Mm,
to carefully, carefully craft made around. Um,
odd.
but yeah, very odd. I was very interested in what that kind of language is doing and
And what
how
kind of
it's
thinking goes into that? Really, when you think about
right,
it, you're talking about
right.
MAID and somehow creating suicidality as the boogeyman. Rebecca, I hate to do this, but we have to take a short break, folks,
Yeah,
and we'll be right back with Rebecca Deutsch.
Eoch Tanuyap, Quiget Yuans Queensna. Hi everybody, my name is Quiget Yuans. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation and the Yagalanis clan of the Haida Nation. You're listening to Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We live, work, play, and broadcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Rebecca Deutsch about her paper on MAID that is being produced as part of her PhD candidacy at York University. Rebecca, we were talking about something very odd, which is that you have this paper about MAID, and people are talking about suicidality as being the boogeyman, I think you called it. Talk more about that.
right. So while I was reading it, a lot of the people who are anti-MAID in the case of mental health conditions explicitly or exclusively sometimes, one of the things that came up over and over again was how do we distinguish between suicidality and a valid desire to die? And I want to kind of
Sorry, I'm
sit with
laughing.
that language. Yes, absolutely. That language is really, it's very interesting because how do you institute and understand this, like how do you understand that distinction and what does producing it do? And I think part of what producing this distinction does is say that certain types of suicide are allowed, are okay, are acceptable, and other kinds are not. I was having a really interesting conversation with one of my colleagues, and he brought up the possibility that when people apply for MAID MDSUMC, they might end up being funneled into involuntary hospitalizations if they are decided to be suicidal instead of a valid request.
Wow.
Um, which is a really scary layer to this and a layer to how the assessments are being developed. And we really don't have, um, in my dissertation, I'm really hoping to kind of look at how this is being developed. But right now, I feel like everything is so new that we don't have that understanding. And what understanding we do kind of have is psychiatrists saying that, depression causes suicidality, and so people with depression maybe shouldn't be eligible. And this kind of language, which I think if they had said something like somebody who's in a acute state of distress should be provided with other kinds of access to supports, that would be a very different claim than that we need to distinguish between suicidality and MAID. Um, yeah,
I'm sorry. I can't get over the idea of a bunch of people sitting in a room making decisions on behalf of somebody who's not in the room about what
absolutely.
is the difference between MAID and suicidality, which implies that some people who get MAID and ask for MAID are sane
Mm-hmm.
and therefore have a right to participate in something that's going to end their life. But somebody who might have a diagnosis of a mental health challenge is therefore not sane and therefore not able to make that choice.
Absolutely.
And I think that it speaks to the um, misunderstanding about what mental health challenges mean in terms of how it impacts on people in their lives. The idea that just because somebody has a diagnosis that they can't work, they can't be a productive person in society, they can't think for themselves, they can't make decisions for themselves is rampant out there.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many people I know who went into a psychiatrist's office and they said, well, you have bipolar, blah, 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 and therefore you're never going to work again in your life and you have to take these meds for the rest of your life. And that's just simply not true. We know many, many people who are bipolar and have done amazing things, great things in their lives. So it just seems to be based on ideas and not on facts more than anything.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of MAID, some of that is going to come down to a value judgment. And I wonder as well how much, I think of when I was younger and I first was in a psychiatrist's office and how powerful and knowledgeable and important they seemed. Um, and if sitting in that room in a really vulnerable space, if I had been told, you'll never be able to live a fulfilled life, you'll never be able to do, you'll never be able to do whatever kinds of things it is that they chose to. I have had interactions like that actually, but yeah, but in a really vulnerable state. And then if I had been presented with the option of MAID by that same person, that also feels really troubling to me. It feels like imbuing psychiatrists with the kind of power to choose in this specific context, and in a lot of contexts, to be
Mm-hmm.
fair,
Mm-hmm.
is really dangerous, and it could do a lot of harm that, of course, psychiatrists aren't thinking about. And if psychiatrists and lawyers and, and doctors are the only people in the room, of course they aren't asking the same kind of questions that you immediately hit on, right? Like, and that we're able to kind of discuss within the context of this conversation because they don't have the same kind of knowledge.
No. And and what you're talking about, what you just kind of framed, is a conversation that really needs to happen between the
Mm-hmm.
professionals, the psychiatrists, the doctors, the psychologists, the social workers, and people from the mental health, um, I want to say arena, but people who have mental
Mm-hmm.
health challenges
Absolutely.
about these very things. It feels sometimes like it's a chasm. Like we have these people over there who are the professionals who are absolutely certain that they have a right and they know and they can
Mm-hmm.
discern, and also view the rest of us as unable and incapable and fragile, along the lines of, my saying, we have to do a trigger warning because it's about suicide, but it's like, why? It's not like talking about suicide is going to make a bunch of people go and throw themselves off a cliff. It just doesn't
Right.
happen that way. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes the whole sort of life of somebody who has a mental health challenge, who is perhaps suicidal, it reduces it down to some sort of caricature, as opposed to the real life things that are going on for that person.
Absolutely. And I feel like some of the language even sanitizes it in a way that makes it difficult to talk about some of the bigger issues that are going on. Like even calling it medical assistance in dying. Um, there are some really interesting, especially from disability spaces, there are some interesting critiques of that. But I think another kind of layer to this is while this policy is going potentially forward, it is kind of in a state of flux, so I don't want to say for sure. Um, Access to housing isn't necessarily being provided. Funding for community-based support systems is so hard to come by. All of the things that are actually beneficial to people. And if we want to talk about what actually helps at reducing suffering and what helps at reducing suicidality and numbers of suicide, what we have to be willing to talk about is the kinds of things like access to healthcare, access to housing, access to community and care and warmth and all of the joyful things, not just access to drugs or involuntary hospitalization or the kinds of ways that even that part of the conversation is being framed, where it's like, have they tried the medications available? It's like, well, have we tried housing? And
Right.
like, have we tried making life a little bit more livable for people who struggle with a variety of different issues?
It's so interesting because I just had a conversation with a man by the name of Jim Gotzine, and he's created a paper on improving mental health outcomes. And what he talks about very clearly and presents in terms of research and studies and documentation is that being involuntarily, even voluntarily committed into a psych ward or being put on those psych meds or whatever have demonstrably worse outcomes than just leaving people alone, which tells you so much. I mean, we have an industry that has created itself into something and propped themselves up with ideas that aren't supported by the research out there and the numbers that are out there, and yet are still pushing those things as the cure instead of housing or going
Right.
to an art gallery or sitting down and talking with people, or all kinds of things that have been proven to be helpful and beneficial to people in times of crisis. So it's just interesting that here I am having another conversation where the backflip of it is that those things that are being presented as possibilities to divert somebody away from MAID are the very things that may in fact cause more harm in their lives and
Yeah.
bring them back.
Mhm. Mhm. It's interesting. And it's funny how those conversations can happen so close together like that. For me, when that happens, it always feels like it's flagging something I should be paying attention to. Um, I don't know, like the universe is like trying to bring something to the front for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Indeed.
I very much feel like there is this kind of strange, I don't know if dissonance is the right word, maybe, but between what people actually find supportive and the kinds of people who should actually be involved in these decisions and what is being offered and who is at the table. Um, Another kind of interesting layer to this is when they were deciding whether MAID MDSUMC was ready to roll forwards or not, they didn't consult any Indigenous elders either,
Mm.
um, which is particularly troubling.
Yes.
And I think based on some of the other articles that I've read, this is a pattern in the way that MAID has been kind of constructed, is that Indigenous people have been very, very rarely consulted. Um, and people impacted are very, very rarely consulted, except for in maybe that kind of back patting way that sometimes those consultations go, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we talked to someone, we're good now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Meaningful consultation has a place, and using somebody as a token consultation is
mhm.
going to cause more damage overall. We need to just take another little break here, Rebecca, but hang on, folks. We're going to come back and finish this conversation with Rebecca about suicide and MAID.
Hey, this is Mark Kiliansky from Golden Shoals. You know, in a world where things are constantly fed to us through a screen, through an algorithm, independent radio offers music and playlists made by friends, neighbors, and humans. I love it so much, and I really want everybody to continue to enjoy that in these modern times. Forget Spotify, forget YouTube. Listen to Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM and coopradio.org.
The streetlights are bleeding through the cracks in the blind, and you're staring at the ceiling, trying to untangle your mind. The clock on the wall is the loudest thing in the room, and it feels like the walls are closing in on you too. I know how the quiet can start to scream. I know how you're trapped inside of a waking dream. Your hands are shaking, you're counting the floorboards tonight, just praying for a flicker, just a little bit of light. You carry a mountain that nobody else can see, and you're smiling for the cameras, pretending to be free. But I see the shadow that's hiding behind your eyes, and I hear the truth underneath all of your beautiful eyes. So this is a song for anyone in pain, for anyone standing out alone in the pouring rain. When the weight of the world is too heavy to hold, and your heart's turning heavy and your blood's running cold, you don't have to be brave, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to pretend that you belonged all along. Just cry if you need to, let the tears start to fall. Yeah, this is a song for the broken, a song for us all. You remember the days when your chest didn't ache before every single promise that they made started to break. Now you're walking through the crowds where you're completely alone, like a ghost in a city that you used to call home. They tell you it's easy, they tell you just breathe, but they don't see the gravity pulling at your sleeve. It's a heavy kind of sadness that settles in the bone, and it makes you feel like you're entirely on your own. You've been fighting a war that has no end in sight, waking up in the morning just to dread the night, and you're tired. Oh God, I know that you're tired of trying to stoke a flame when you've run out of fire. Yeah, this is a song for anyone in pain, for anyone standing out alone in the pouring rain, when the weight of the world is too heavy to hold and your heart's turning heavy and your blood's running cold. You don't have to be brave, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to pretend that you belonged all along. Just cry if you need to, let the tears start to fall. Yeah, this is a song for the broken, a song for us all. So hollow to help you get through all the bitterness you swallow, but I will sit here in the dark right next to your chair, and I'll hold your hand so you know someone is there. We can scream at the sky, we can curse at the floor until our throats are all raw and we can't anymore, because pain isn't something you just wash away. It's a storm you gotta sit through day after day, but you are still breathing, you are still here through the terror, doubt and the paralyzing fear. You're still here. Don't let go. Yeah. Oh, this is a song for anyone in pain, for anyone standing out alone in the pouring rain, when the weight of the world is too heavy to hold and your heart's turning heavy and your blood's running cold. You don't have to be brave, you don't have to be strong, you don't have to pretend that you belonged all along. Just cry if you need to, let the tears start to fall. Yeah, this is a song for the broken, a song for us all. So let the rain fall down on your face. You don't have to win every single race. The room is getting quiet again. The storm is slowing down, my friend. You're not alone in the dark tonight. We're just waiting for the morning light. Yeah, we're just waiting for the light.
This station and the more than 250 across the country like it need your support. Day in and day out, they bring you the news that matters, they play the music you won't hear anywhere else, and they are part of this community. You can make sure they get the funding they need to grow by visiting mycri.ca, where you can find all the details about the Community Radio Initiative. It takes less than 5 minutes and a few clicks to generate an email to the politicians who need to hear from you and to make a difference for this community. mycri.ca.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Rebecca Deutsch about her PhD candidacy and her paper on MAID in Canada. MAID as in medically assistance in dying. Rebecca, welcome back. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, you mentioned in your paper, is eugenics. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that plays into MAID?
Right. So Canada has a very long history with eugenics, one that often doesn't get talked about because, sorry, when people think about eugenics, often they think about Nazi Germany and they don't realize how many subtle ways eugenic logics have kind of worked their way throughout the way that Canadian society has been structured. Um, Historically, one of the major ways that eugenics showed up was through involuntary sterilizations, involuntary hospitalizations, where people were cut off from access to other people in their communities, which has really continued. That began in asylums and in this kind of the way we historically think about these horrific kind of asylums as though we've moved so far past that moment, um which we haven't at all. It's just kind of changed faces, and now you can see a lot of that kind of coming up in terms of, I think, in terms of the way that medication is sometimes constructed and pushed on certain people. I think you can also see it kind of in immigration provisions, and now you can see it coming up a lot in like genetic screening and selective abortions. And one of the arguments that's coming up in relation to MAID specifically is that because certain lives are not perceived as necessarily valuable, they're not given the same kinds of access in terms of quality care, in terms of, I've already touched on housing. I feel like that's been a big touch point for me. But you do see when you look at literature that there's a strong relationship between disability broadly and madness specifically and poverty. Um, and in the case of applications we've already seen coming from a disabled space, some of those have been very specifically about things that could have been ameliorated through access to proper supports.
Right.
So I read about this case where somebody had a really severe sensitivity to different chemicals and perfumes, and the place she was living in, which was the only place she could get subsidized living, really exposed her to a lot of the things that were impacting her disability. Um, and when some of the community came together and helped with funding so she could stay in a hotel instead for a period of time, she canceled her MAID request because she was able to access the care that she needed. So
Right.
part of the concern is that as MAID continues to move forwards and become more of an option, different kind of support programs could be dialed back
Right.
where MAID gets really treated as a primary kind of option. There was a really interesting study, interesting's maybe not the right word, but in the Netherlands where a right to die translated into a duty to die
Oh my
quite
God.
quickly. Um, because by dying, it's less expensive for certain social systems like Medicare or medical care or, different systems along those lines,
Hmm.
which is an angle that I think we need to be particularly concerned about.
Yes, and the disabled community has been concerned about it. I've heard many people
Yes.
talk about how their doctors start advising them about MAID.
Hmm.
So they're not given the options to make their lives better. They're given an option to die. And
Right.
And I don't think the regular average Joe out there is understanding what that feels like. If you have a disability, one woman I talked to had a disability that meant she literally couldn't even get out of bed unless
Mm-hmm.
somebody came to her house and helped her get out of bed and dressed her and then came back and helped her get in her pajamas and put her into bed. She actually couldn't get to the bathroom even on her own. So she was left to literally soil herself in her bed because people weren't coming to the house to help her get out of her bed. And she had put in an application for MAID because she couldn't live like that. And because of that, because of the lack of care, her illness was going to get worse and worse and worse. And her children could very well end up being the ones who found her dead in her bed, which is not,
Right.
it's not an option for mothers usually to
Mm-hmm.
have that happen if they can choose against it. And that was one of the things that she found was that MAID was offered to her as an option.
Right. And it makes me really sad and concerned that MAID is being offered as almost a frontline kind of treatment in some of those circumstances, as opposed to what people actually need in order to live a full life that feels good for them. Um, and there's a very real concern that as MAID continues on, some of that could become even worse. Um, Particularly as it enters kind of the popular imagination a little bit more than I think it has at this point, and how that'll affect politicians running for election and where they're promising to put their funds, things like that. It's really concerning.
What do you see as needed? And you
I
don't
th-
have to have all the answers, but what are you seeing might be something that can be put in place that might help?
well, I think I definitely don't have all the answers, but from where I'm sitting, what I think is needed is a greater care and attention to what communities are asking for. That doesn't mean that MAID shouldn't be a part of that puzzle. As I said, I think for some people, MAID is a better option than what is available to them, which could be, as I said before, dying by suicide, in more violent kind of ways.
Mhm.
Um, so MAID can definitely be a part of the puzzle, but it can't be the whole picture. What needs to be incorporated is a lot of care for how do we show up for one another? How do we take care of one another? How do we be in community in ways that I just don't think we talk about enough? I think we've kind of got stuck in this biomedical framework where medicine is treated as though it has all the answers, even though we live in communities, we live in bodies, we live in spaces. Like some of the things that would help are so tactile and immediate. And why isn't the same amount of care being provided to all of that rich picture of what could help somebody live a full and joyful life instead of just MAID? Why isn't MAID just a piece of it?
Right. No, I think that those are good questions to be asking and evaluating. Do you think they'll be asked and evaluated?
Um, I really want to say yes, but looking at the evidence that's coming out right now, they definitely are not being asked in the spaces where policy is being actively shaped and where assessment procedures are being actively developed. And those are the spaces where these kind of questions and this kind of knowledge, which I think to people who have actually had certain kinds of lived experience may come more easily. Um, but I think these are the spaces where that knowledge is so deeply needed, and it's not being brought into or taken up in those spaces in the way that really needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. Rebecca, thank you for coming and chatting with us and about this very, very important topic. And when you have finished your PhD and stuff, and you have more to talk about on this issue, please get in touch with us and come back and do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like I said before, you're doing such important work here, and I'm really excited to get to be a part of this episode.
Great, thank you. I'm very glad that you came and we had this important conversation. So thank you. And we'll be right back, folks.
Hey folks, it's Steve Ferguson, your 21st century schizoid man, here to invite you to join me on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. for your weekly dose of progressive and experimental rock. I get crazy guest callers, I fight the turntable, and I dig up the most obscure music from this century and last. I've got prog metal, art rock, math rock, fusion jazz, and psychedelia all packed into my weekly hour. You want it? I've got it. Just name it, I'll play it. That's Prog Rock Alley on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. 100.5 FM, CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. See you there.
I've been through storms that shook my soul, lost in the dark, nowhere to go. I've carried doubts, I've felt the weight of every time I walked away. But deep inside there's still a fire, a spark of hope that won't expire. No matter what, no matter how, I choose to rise, I choose right now. I won't break, I won't bend, this is not how my story ends. I will fight for me, stand up strong, I will rise even when it all feels wrong. Every tear, every scar, every fear inside my heart, they won't define the soul in me. I will fight for me, I will believe, I will believe. I've given love but lost my own. I've tried so hard to not feel alone, but I am worth the love I give. I am here, I'm meant to live. The road is long, the climb is steep, but I refuse to let fear keep me from the life that I deserve. Every step I'll find my worth. I won't break, I won't bend, this is not how my story ends. I will fight for me, stand up strong, I will rise even when it all feels wrong. Every tear, every scar, every
Radio, 100.5 FM, Vancouver's community radio station for 50 years. With great local music, arts, public affairs, many languages, and all kinds of great stuff. Support us for our spring membership drive at www.coopradio.org and learn how to become a member today.
Today. Nice job.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. My thanks to Rebecca Deutsch for having this great conversation with me about MAID and suicidality. Rebecca is a PhD candidate in gender, feminist, and women's studies at York University. It was a refreshing chat about what is often a serious discussion without resorting to all of that. If you find you are in need of resources around MAID or suicidality, don't hesitate to reach out to us here on Rethreading Madness, and we will connect you with information or resources. Music today was by Sherry Ulrich, Tom O'Dell, and Fearless Soul. And to you, our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through, just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or somehow